So I think it's a really interesting way to talk about it and look at it and define maybe the subconscious mind is like subconscious. It's whatever is below your conscious level of awareness.
Which is a mouthful already.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
wait, what?
Yeah.
I mean, I get it, but it's
Yeah, but also like at the same time, like when you don't define the subconscious, it can be really scary. It's like this boogeyman.
and it defines you.
Well, yeah, absolutely. That's a great way. Great point. But yeah, like I think people just get like worried and scared about. Like, I know I used to be like almost like in a panic about like my subconscious patterns and subconscious programs and like how am I gonna? And it's like you just get pull back a little bit and slow. Like, what is the subconscious?
Yes.
And it's like it's okay. It's all the things that are happening below my level of conscious awareness.
Yeah. And conscious awareness, there's the things that you are aware of.
Yes.
That you're speaking, that you're doing, that you're feeling. But beneath all of those, exactly what you're saying, that is it's below, is the subconscious, which drives all of that, is driving our conscious thoughts, our feelings, and then our actions that come from the thoughts and feelings.
Yeah. So it's essentially the survival mechanism of the human body. So the subconscious is what is keeping our like vehicle alive so that we can have a conscious experience. So it's not a bad thing at all. It's what is bringing everything into like manifestation for us to consciously observe and be aware of.
Yes.
So it's all the things that happen in our body that we don't even know about, all the chemical reactions and the interactions between different hormones and proteins and everything that's happening, because we can't possibly do all those things. We can't pump our blood and keep ourselves alive. Like I wouldn't even know what hormone to produce next if I was supposed to be consciously in charge of it.
Yeah, and to get a little bit more simplistic, it's also what helps us do the things that we do every day that we don't have to relearn. So when you get up and need to go to the bathroom, you don't have to reteach yourself how to walk and then how to pee or poop. It's like, okay, yes, my body knows how to do this. That's where the subconscious, where we always say like our ego or subconscious, they're kind of interchangeable. I feel like there's nuances for sure, but it's developed in childhood. Like we learn the things that we learn in childhood to help us survive in our adult life.
Yeah. And the subconscious is actually how we learn, because we don't actually learn things intellectually. We believe we do, but everything that we learn is from mirroring and being around people. Like you don't teach a baby how to talk by saying like, okay, now you put your tongue like this, and then you put your tongue like this, or even like walking. You don't really tell like a 2-year-old or however old kids are when they learn how to walk, that, okay, now you're going to put your left foot in front of your right foot and then your right foot. They know that innately because they've watched people walk their whole life. So then they just see it and they're like, oh, I can do that too. And they naturally do it. That's how we learn everything.
So I think, and I think this would be a good distinction. So because I've never thought of it that way, and I think that that's really good. So how would you differentiate like someone learning how to ride a bike? Because you're not you're as a child, you're not sitting there like looking at people riding bikes constantly. I feel like I was taught to ride a bike. You put your, put your foot on the pedal and then you move it and you're on training wheels. I remember like my stepfather like holding the back and I've got a helmet. So it's almost like a skill. You're learning something. So
there is a level of like memorizing knowledge and like memorizing the steps, but there's also like nobody can tell you what it feels like to actually be riding a bike.
Yes,
that's experiential. So you can say like, okay, you sit in the seat, you hold the handlebars, you move the pedals, you balance and don't tip over, but nobody knows what that means until that moment when all of a sudden, like, someone goes from holding the seat to letting go, and you realize, oh wait, I'm doing it. I'm up and I'm balancing, and then you know how to ride a bike.
Yeah.
And then sometimes you panic and fall and can't do it again for a little while, but then eventually it's like we always say, it's like riding a bike. because then it's completely, it's a subconscious thing. It's like you don't ever need to consciously remember how to ride a bike again.
Yes, same thing with driving a car.
Yeah.
When you learn how to drive a car.
Yeah.
For any new skill, really,
Yeah.
it is. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's what driving a car is interesting too, because there's so many moving parts. And it's like, okay, like this is the brake, this is the gas, you have to put it in drive, so look out the side view mirror, make sure there's no one coming behind you, you have to look in the back, you have to be aware of everything, you have to pull out into traffic, also looking in front of, like you have to look where you're going while doing all these different things. And we can only do like one thing at a time. Everything else is all subconscious. So there is like the nuance to it. Like there's things to remember, but the actual learning just comes from seeing things and mirroring them and doing them, and then it just gets ingrained.
Yeah, I feel as we go deeper into this conversation, we're not necessarily going to talk about these things. We just wanted to bring forth like how the subconscious does pretty much dictate all that we do on so many levels. Like if they're like talk about an onion, it's like a beach ball size onion, probably bigger than that. It's to uncover everything that it does.
Yeah, it literally like it knows, it's the record of our life, and our subconscious knows everything about us and everything we've ever experienced.
Yes.
In a really cool way that like we have access to it, but it's like difficult to, I don't know how to put it, like we're filtering out. We experience so many things in every moment, and the subconscious mind filters out everything that it doesn't think is meaningful for our experience. So we get such a small amount of the actual input that we experience, because we couldn't, like if we're walking down the street and, or like imagine you're walking in a forest and you were conscious of every single leaf on every single tree. You'd trip, like you wouldn't be able to like take that on, but our subconscious mind is. Like when you walk into a room, your subconscious mind takes in every bit of information and knows everything about that room. And then our conscious awareness only knows the few little things that can pass the filter of what our subconscious has deemed important to us or not.
Yeah.
And I think that's also really cool, because you can hypnotize people, go back to a moment and pull out information that they don't know they know, but they took it in as they walked into the room. They noticed that guy sitting in the corner or what color the thing was over here, even though they never consciously recognized it.
Yeah.
So there's like, it's almost like the subconscious is like a superpower and on so many levels. It's like you said, it's like it's doing everything for us and like creating our reality in so many ways. We just usually don't even like stop to think about it.
Right. Yes. I didn't even know that there was like a subconscious until like maybe a decade ago. And I even to this day, I'm still unpacking it and unpacking what the subconscious is to me, like how it's shaped my identity, how it's shaped who I am today and how I show up in the world and why. And we started talking about how it happens at childhood, but it also continues. Because the childhood is obviously the developmental phase and we're absorbing everything. We're taking it in, we're taking all of, really, it's mainly energy. Even though language obviously plays a huge part in it, but the energy, the spoken energy of something is so different. Like if I like looked at you as like a young boy and was like, you're so ugly. As opposed to like looking like, you're fucking ugly. Like there is a difference in the energy that I just, both are horribly mean, but like the first was like a little bit more playful and there was like, wait, what? Like, how was that? So yeah, I don't know. I think it's interesting to have an energetic piece to it, but like we're talking about, it's all absorbed. We're taking this in so that the subconscious can filter that information to the conscious mind, what we present ourselves as to be part of a tribe, to basically get love, acceptance. Okay, we're watching, we're mirroring, we're seeing what's accepted, what's not accepted, how this is, how that is, and that creates our persona, our personality, our ego that we talk about all the time. So this is the filter. It is literally the lens that we look through of life.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was saying before that it's like all the things we need to do to keep our body alive, and there's so many of them that the subconscious is taking care of. And then at the same time, there's so many like rules you need to learn, and customs, and what it's like to be in this family and live in this community and be in this country and be a part of this religion or whatever it is. And like a little kid can't possibly like know all that and like actually learn all that stuff, but it gets absorbed from being in a society and in a culture and in a family, and then that becomes the pattern that rules our life, and we never choose. We never say like, okay, now today I'm going to download the family program, and tomorrow it'll be like the community and the church and whatever organization or groups you want. It just happens. So then, like without our knowing, years later, we're running a pattern based on something somebody said to us when we were 4 years old that we don't remember, or like did never seem to really have any significance. But for some reason at that time, as a 4-year-old, we were like, that's really important not to know that. And it got absorbed into our subconscious.
Yeah.
So there's something really, really, say like really powerful about bringing awareness to your subconscious and your subconscious mind.
I agree. And I believe the subconscious mind becomes problematic when we are unaware of it, because then it dictates our lives. And that's when we begin to become victims and, oh, life is happening to me and not for me. And that was me for literally the majority of my life up until like said maybe a decade ago. So I didn't know that these patterns and programs were being dictated from my subconscious. I think what's really interesting, and it's something that Peter Crone says, is that he believes that like this is what we're here for. Like to understand what our subconscious is, these patterns, these constraints that confine us, that only allow us to look through a certain lens. He calls it like a container. Like if you're in a container of I'm not worthy, then that's how you look at life, and everything around you, circumstances, people, your job, relationships, everything that you relate to is going to be filtered through that lens of inadequacy or I'm not worthy. It's literally that deep. And that's how I love dissecting it, because it's so, there's so many layers to it. But he also says that we come here with those constraints, which I think is really powerful to understand, because like you're saying, like we don't know, like as kids we're like wait we're just absorbing and sponging and taking in all of this, but I think we choose it. Like, and also what he's saying, like we come here to learn through this school of soul school, earth school, whatever you like to call it, and like it's almost like, we don't have to do anything, just absorb. Life's going to present us with what's confining us, what's limiting us, what's constraining us. We just usually don't realize it until we've hit our middle age and we look around and we're like, holy fuck, where am I in my life? And I've said this on the podcast, that's literally where I was. I feel like I had a midlife crisis at 30, and I've heard this term. I was listening to the podcast with the Diary of the CEO and Dr. K, and he calls it a quarter life crisis. And I never heard that term. I was like, oh my God, that's what I went through. And he said it's such a necessary process to unravel all of these programs and conditions. And I'm like, I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful that I had this, I guess you call it an awakening moment, because I, for some reason, saw possibly the trajectory of my life if I didn't have this. And I was already miserable. I don't even think I would have stayed alive. It was that annoying and horrible in a sense.
Yeah, and I do think that those, I don't know, what would you call it? I would say like moments, but not really like, it's like that the idea of like a quarter life crisis, a midlife crisis, like those are built in.
Yeah.
And I do think that that's a part of the process. Like we are supposed to go through that, like you're saying, like there's a transformation that's supposed to take place, because we're not supposed to be the same person in life.
Correct, yes.
And I think, yeah, and it's probably like if we're not changing or not transforming at the proper speed that our higher self wants for us, then it gets a lot more challenging, and we have those moments. I think it's like that quarter life crisis is getting much more prevalent. I think that they say that in that podcast. At first, actually, there's a John Mayer song where he says, "Might be a quarter life crisis," from like I think his first album. It's like I just had that idea in my mind, of like having a crisis at like 25 and not like the usual midlife crisis, but it's the same idea, right? That midlife crisis, the like quintessential midlife crisis of like, a person's got the great job and the beautiful house and they're driving the really cool car and they feel empty and meaningless. Is saying like, yeah, there was a time in life for doing and achieving and doing this stuff, but that's not your purpose here. So when you're giving that stuff too much importance, is like the subconscious is going to come back around and create situations that show you that you're putting too much importance on the wrong things. You're not transforming, you're not growing, you're not actualizing your potential, you're just stuck in a loop of the same thing over and over. So it's like, it's a really powerful thing. And it's something that we can like trust and listen to. And it's like, okay, like all these signs are showing me something in my life isn't right. There's something missing. That's not a bad thing.
Totally. And I think for so long, the societal norm of like what success is and what life, quote unquote, should be just kind of plagues everybody. Like that's also like we have our individual subconscious like programs and patterns, but that's a cultural one that we're kind of like all connected to, would you say?
Yes. Absolutely.
So I think because we're built in a society where it's very much praised to do the things that other people have done to gain success is normalized. But like those people achieved the success because they were probably doing something that was unique to them. And to mimic it all is what's causing these crisis is a hard word. I do like it, but these awakening moments being like, wait a minute. I've learned, I've listened, I've absorbed all of this information. I went to school, I have the house, the kids, this, all the shit, and I'm still miserable. Like, what's going on?
Yeah, because like, definitely in the West, we're not taught to be our unique self.
Right. Yes. And that's not necessarily like, and again, I think that that's part of the program.
Yeah.
Like, that's what we're coming here to, like, okay, figure this out. But then it's like, well, how do we figure it out? And that's, I think, then it's going down deep into realizing, okay, who am I? And the I that I am is not the subconscious.
Right.
Which is really kind of crazy. The subconscious just thinks it's doing its job by protecting us, showing us how we're supposed to be in society. And not that it's not like appropriate at times, like you said, also like showing us like, hey, maybe don't kill people, don't like harm your neighbor, don't harm animals, like things like that. But it's also really good at establishing an identity, i.e. an ego, and then making sure it's right about itself. And it's so sneaky in the way that it does that I hope by us talking about this right now that people understand this is an unraveling process. And just because you and I have kind of at least understood these concepts of this, the subconscious, like I'm just beginning to realize these patterns on how I've operated for over 3 decades. And it is really challenging. And I cry almost all the time when I think of it and how I've lived my life. That crying is like both like beautiful and then like sad at the same time, because it's beautiful that I'm aware of it. And the sadness is like, oh my God, this little girl just really thought her entire life that she wasn't good enough. And every single thing, and I'm telling you, every single thing that I do is to gain the affection and love and acceptance or praise from other people because I didn't know that I could give it to myself.
Yeah, that's so powerful, and that's the gift of like awareness.
Yeah.
But it is a long process, and
Yeah.
for me, it's been very similar going through this process of first you start to understand the concepts, and then I think at least for me, it was like I intellectually understood a lot of these ideas, but couldn't quite piece it all together as it relates to who I believed I was
Mhm.
because it's so sneaky and so like pervasive that like we think that we are these ideas and we think that we are the ego that you said before this that just to clarify for people listening, like I think we're probably on the same page and say like the ego is an aspect of the subconscious mind, but it's not the entire subconscious mind, but it's the part that believes it is an individual identity. And what you just said, you said something that reminded me of kind of how I started the show and saying that like the subconscious mind is the function and like the software almost that's keeping the body alive. So it's so attached to the body and like our animal instincts and like our lower nature. But you said we are not the body. Like we're more than we are what we started talking about, the conscious. We are the conscious awareness of the body. So like what I am, like the I am that I am is the awareness of what this body is experiencing in this life. And the subconscious mind is the aspect of my mind, like 95% of my mind that is focused strictly on keeping this body alive and fitting into society and being accepted and being okay. And they're not always in alignment. Those two things aren't I say like the what's best for the subconscious isn't always what's best for the conscious.
Sure.
But the way what as you become aware of it, the way that it really works, or the way I like to describe it, is that like if we were a ship, the conscious mind is the captain of the ship. It's the one that like it decides, sets the intentions. It's like, okay, this is where we want to go. This is when we want to be there. This is the route we're going to take. And then the subconscious mind is the crew. It's the ones that take the orders and do all the things. They're the ones, I don't know much about ships exactly, but they're the ones putting up the sails if there's sails on it, or they're steering the ship, they're setting the coordinates into the GPS, they're putting the anchor up and down, they're like checking the wind and all the things that you do. They're cleaning the boat, they're doing everything that you need to do to keep it running well, keep it functioning and working. But if they just follow their own course and don't listen to the captain, then they're never going to get to their destination. So often we decide, we set an intention to do something, and then there's disconnect. And it's either because there's another program running in the subconscious that we're not aware of, or when the subconscious goes to do all the things that we asked it to do, we don't recognize what it's doing as the same thing. It would be like if a captain was like, all right, we're setting out and we're going to be in Hawaii. Let's go to Hawaii. And then like 10 minutes later, he looked out and was like, well, this isn't Hawaii. What's wrong with you? And got mad at the crew and started yelling at the crew. Well, there's steps in between. Like it takes some time to get from California to Hawaii. And you have to steer the ship and get there. And you have to leave the harbor. Like there's all these things you need to do in order to get to Hawaii. But if you start judging that trip based on if it's Hawaii yet, then there's going to be disconnect, and the crew, the subconscious mind, and they're like, what the hell? Like he keeps saying he wants one thing, and then he judges us and gets mad about it, and then he says he wants another thing, and there's this disconnect, and then that's when you just like don't feel good, and you feel like your life is in shambles and you're lost.
Yes, I like that analogy a lot. I've heard you use that and say I think it's really helpful because with I look and kind of have what's helped me a lot with uncovering the subconscious, how it's tied to my ego and like the personality of who we are, is the subconscious is the storyteller. So our ego, who we are, is really a walking conversation all day long. We're not talking like obviously we're in conversation now, but I'm talking like a conversation 24 hours a day in our minds. I do tend to talk to myself out loud, but regardless, I'm having a conversation with myself to act a certain way, to feel a certain way. Like that's what I mean by the subconscious is the storyteller, because it absorbed all of this information at such younger years, but it continues to imprint these energetic feels up until now. Serious. Like it's just the ones that are so from 0 to 7 years old are the biggest ones that imprint. So when I say the subconscious is the storyteller, what's helped me is really understanding. You have to become the observer of your thoughts, because when you're conscious of your thoughts, then they're not subconscious any longer. So that's also what you mean. They're no longer beneath the conscious awareness. You've at least ascended to become the observer and to realize, hopefully most people listening to this, oh, I'm not my thoughts. They're literally just words. They're words in this mind that I can change. They're words. We literally live in a vibrational universe caused by these words. So the subconscious is the storyteller, and most of those stories are coming from past experiences that inform present and future decisions. You don't want to get hurt because this happened. That's a story in your head. Okay, I'm never going to do this. I'm never going to say this. I'm never going to go there. I'm never going to act this way. Past informing the future, because it happened and then you learned a lesson. Your subconscious stuck that in. Your ego identified with it and say, okay, I'm either not going to be that person or I'm going to be that person. That's the story. That's what I mean by it's something is wrapped in a story. There's a circumstance wrapped in a story from the subconscious. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
So then it's like, all right, let's try to identify these stories and the thoughts and where they're coming from. Yeah, there's a
joining the conversation.
It's like, excuse me. So when you become the observer of your thoughts, so like I did, I began observing all of the thoughts, because once they're now, at least in my conscious awareness, I can gain a feeling from that. Because your subconscious mind is driving your conscious thoughts, and then that conscious thought is eliciting a feeling, and that feeling is dictating how you act. And it's typically a reaction. It's coming from that reactionary place of either hurt, scared, fearful, lack, worried, inadequacy, feeling inadequate. And then it's like the never-ending cycle, as Joe Dispenza says, the thought feeling loop. It keeps going and going. That is our persona. That's our ego. And the subconscious is the storyteller of it, making sure that it's protecting us and keeping us safe, so that like, okay, yeah, these people are going to think you're crazy if you start talking about XYZ, don't do that, or whatever it may be. So then I started to, all right, these are all stories. Where did they come from? And why are they defining my life so much? And it began really setting into me the awareness of how grateful I am that, okay, I now can see this, because it's protected me and kept me small. It's kept me very small my whole life. My ego specifically, this is me, to not rock the boat, to be the good girl, to just, almost like sit and be seen. Don't make too much of a wave. You don't want to upset people. Like I'm so petrified to upset anyone. I'm so petrified of judgment of others. I am so deeply petrified of abandonment. And this goes back to literally before I was 1 year old. Like my mother and father got divorced, and like, there's deep. So this is all subconscious programming that I am just uncovering now at not like now, it's been an unfolding over the past couple of years, but I'm saying it took 3 decades to understand this. And I've said this before, the more aware I become, the more aware I become, because now the storyline that accompanies most of my thoughts is something that's made up to me. I experienced my parents' divorce very differently than my mother and father did.
Yeah.
As was their reasoning for coming to Earth to learn through that. And I'm so grateful that I chose these 2 amazing teachers to learn through. But I didn't see it that way for literally the majority of my life. I was the victim, I'm abandoned, here it is, like my father left us, all this stuff. And that fed that narrative for a really good time. And it was able to shape my personality, the ego who I thought I was, until I just was like angry at my father for decade upon decade. And I was like, what, how is this? This doesn't seem right. And just it makes you get to the point like not feeling good, kind of like that quarter life crisis. Like you go back to like we all just want to feel better. And I think the reason why we're not feeling better is because we're allowing these subconscious stories that were from such young ages, we haven't reframed them. We haven't said like, is this actually true? Has this always been the case for me in my life? And it's always no. It just is reinforced. Like I think it's real and I think it's true, but it's only in my mind that I think it's real and true. Well, okay, if it's only in my mind, then I must be able to change it or transform it or begin telling a different story. Because if the subconscious works on repetition and repeating thoughts that become beliefs, that become feelings, and then can become actions. And I learned all of this as a child, like, all right, you can't teach a dog old tricks. No, I don't believe that. Like this is beautiful. Just because you're old doesn't mean that you can't change your subconscious mind. That's what it's there to do. It is there to learn and absorb. It just thinks it knows and did everything and like can retire on the back burner. It's like, no. Let's start this new story, subconscious. Here we go, ego. You want to become a new person? This is how you do it. It's letting go. It's detaching yourself from those stories that created your personality and ego. And I didn't understand that detachment for so long. Drop the attachment. We read the book, The 5 Levels of Attachment by oh gosh, which one was it?
Not John Miguel.
It was one of his sons. And I was like, yeah, I get this. No. I got it then. It was planted the seed. And I think it took me like 8 years. And I was like, oh, detach myself from the subconscious stories that have created this ego personality of mine that I'm just not wanting to be any longer. You have no obligation to stay the same person. And for so long I thought that because I was like, oh my gosh, everybody's gonna leave me, no one's gonna like me, haha, fear of abandonment, here we go. That's why, that's how sneaky the ego and subconscious is. Sneaky might not be the right word. It was doing its job. It really, again, it's a survival, like we're saying, primitive. It doesn't want me to feel abandoned or scared or anything.
Because it is that story. Like the ego literally is the story. So you can't change it or let go of it through the ego because it's not going to allow you to. But it's like once you have that awareness, that is proof that you can change it because you're seeing it from another perspective. You're out of it. There's a bunch of stuff there's a bunch of stuff I want to almost like go back and dig through, is what you said.
Okay.
The
diggers.
Yeah.
Remember I said that a while ago, like maybe a year or two ago, like our audience are the diggers, the people who want to dig deep. Who's diggers with us? Yeah. It's literally the perfect analogy. Like, yeah, let's go deeper, let's dig, let's keep going.
So there was a couple, you had said like observing your thoughts, and you are the observer of your thoughts. And I just want to almost like get clear on that, because that's one of those things that I heard and said for years, but I was still in the thoughts that I thought I was observing. And there's a difference between detaching, like you said, and witnessing a story with no emotion versus knowing that you're thinking.
Yeah.
Like you're not the observer just because you know that you're thinking. If you're telling yourself a story, or it's like you said, a walking narration of how well everybody's doing stuff to you and it's everybody else's fault. And if they just knew how good you were, like whatever this thing is that's going on in your head, you're not observing, even if you know you're doing that. Observing is a whole nother level. It reminds me, like Joe Dispenza says, that a memory without an emotion is wisdom.
Yes.
But like, so you're not why if you're just going over the same thing over and over again, like that's not wisdom. Wisdom is when you are able to be the observer and recognize it for what it is without the story about it. And then the other thing was about learning. And you're just talking about kind of how we pick up these stories, and use like such a great example of like your parents getting divorced at 1 year old, where you weren't able to intellectually have that conversation with yourself about like, well, why is my father not here anymore? He abandoned me because I'm not good. Like that wasn't a conscious thought and a decision to believe that story. It was a subconscious impression, or it was impressed on your subconscious by how you felt as you experienced it, kind of. And then what we tend to do is that's the story, and we assume it's an objective fact, and that it's not a opinion. It's not. You were like 30 years old, living your life based on the opinion of a 1 year old, and being like, no, I'm not going to listen to any other opinions because this 1 year old girl had it all figured out, and she clearly can't be wrong. And I just think it's really funny, but it
is kind of just like cute and adorable.
Yeah.
That it's like, yeah. So this is the inner child work that we talk about.
Yes.
So yes, and that's why we show love and compassion. And Peter Crone also says, like, the ego doesn't want to be healed. It wants to be held. That 1 year old doesn't want to be healed. It wants to be held. Like, okay, I'm not going to abandon you. When I say it's me. I am now the parent of that 1 year old saying, I will not abandon you no matter what. I am here with you.
Yeah. She's gonna say something about
that.
With abandonment, but I don't.
I got you off track.
No,
sorry.
it's fine. Yeah, no, that was you're absolutely right though.
Well, because the abandonment, it's then what again the subconscious and ego did was just give me evidence throughout my life that if I showed up authentically to myself, people got really mad, angry, they'd leave, they'd stop talking to me, and what happened? That just perpetuated the fear of loss and people leaving me. So what did I do? I hid. I stayed small. Okay, I'll do whatever you want to do. That's fine. I'll be the good girl. I'll say yes. I'll do this. I won't speak up. I won't do that. Because when I ever did or said something, I have thousands of examples of this. You and I have talked about it. My friends, like people, like they would just stop talking to me.
Yeah.
Stop talking to me.
Which is another great example. This is a great example of the captain giving the orders to the crew. You literally told your subconscious, proved like, okay, if I speak up, people aren't going to like me. If I'm my authentic self, I'm not going to be accepted. Go. And they were like, all right. And they went to work and they did all the things they needed to do to create a reality where that was what you experienced. The problem is like you just didn't realize that you were the one that was giving the orders because it was absorbed when you were 1 year old. It was never a conscious decision to like, okay, I think I'm going to live my life based on this. But it's the same thing. Like it's like I live very similarly in this state of unworthiness and feeling the need to either validate myself or not be seen. And it's like something I've dealt with for a long time. I don't want to say I still do, but it shows up. It shows up for sure. It's a pattern that I'm working through and understanding. I'm bringing awareness to.
Exploring.
But it was, yeah, exploring is a good word for it, but it's something that I didn't know was there until so recently. And even when it was something that I had uncovered, I didn't know all the ways that I was reinforcing it throughout the day until I started doing like deeper work on really understanding why I'm doing the things that I'm doing,
Mm.
which is then opened up to me that like everything's a two-way street. So we can have these patterns that are like these subconscious patterns that are playing out in our life based on a story, but then we can also have a story in our mind that's being reinforced by the patterns that are playing out. So we do things habitually, not knowing why we do them, but our subconscious knows everything. So it's like, okay, he's still doing the thing, the story must still be true, and we're reinforcing the story. And we have no idea that there's a correlation at all between the thing we're doing and the story, because it's just like, well, it's just the way I do it. Like I don't speak up when I'm in a crowd of people. I don't do like whatever it is.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful. I love the examples, and I think that it's relatable. I mean, I think we all, I truly believe this, and Peter Crone says this too. I think every single one of us comes to Earth with that inadequacy and not feeling enough. I don't think there's one person that does it. Again, as a beautiful understanding that we are here to grow and evolve and to recognize that. This is really powerful, and it helps me that the way that I perceive the world is exactly through this lens that my subconscious, my ego wants me to experience life, to grow and to learn.
Yeah.
So it's giving me evidence, but it's almost like our higher self is up there being like, hey, I'm also giving you a lot of clues to figure out that this isn't your true identity. You've just identified with it for so long, you think it's the real you. But it's not, because it thinks it's separate and it's attached to this story that's not really real. So like, let's begin dismantling that. It's kind of hard to describe. Like, I'm trying to kind of keep with the story of like the abandonment and like my parents getting divorced before I was one. I think what really helped me is like about like maybe like 8 or 9 years ago, when we were discovering like your actions are caused by like these stories and these feelings, and like it has nothing to do with anybody else but me. So like your actions are strictly through the lens that you're looking through from your subconscious patterns, beliefs that are bringing feelings and actions. So anything that I do is on me. I'm thinking this way, I'm feeling this way, I'm acting this way. But we unfortunately believe it's other people that are doing things to us. So my point being, like, I thought it was my father's fault.
Yeah.
So this is, hopefully this is gonna all make sense. When I started realizing, like, okay, everybody's doing things to gain love, to not be a certain way, then I had so much compassion and empathy for my father. Because it was like, oh shit, for him to do what he did before I was even one, to leave like his family and his wife, I can't imagine what story is going through his mind. And I felt so awful. Because I don't believe it was a conscious choice. I believe what he did was reactionary to feed that story that he had going on in his head. Because it doesn't make sense. Like, wait, you have a beautiful wife, you just got married, you just had a baby, you have a house, you have a career, like all this, and then it's literally gone. So I had so much compassion. I was like, okay, it had nothing to do with me. So it had nothing to do with me. The fear of abandonment, it's not that it's gone. That didn't alleviate. So this is what I meant by when Peter Crone said, we come here, we incarnate on earth with these containers, with these constraints, with these limitations to transcend and ascend them. And it was like, okay, he had to do that some way. Like I chose them, I chose these parents.
That was the deal you had.
Exactly. And then it's revelatory. It revealed to me this deep inadequacy of fear of loss and fear of abandonment. And what's been going on for literally 37 years is this fear. And it's like, oh my God, okay, let's change the story. Here we go. And now it's like, okay, now I do want to say, like, that's the reframe. It's like, I see it. All right. The subconscious is now conscious. I think that's the biggest step. That's a big, now from here, it's not like I'm healed. It's like, okay, I'm good, but just gonna walk on water. Like, I'm good, I figured it out. No, the subconscious and the ego identity that has been created over the past 3 decades, it's now gonna undo itself. Because it now knows, oh shit, she found out. And it's gonna try to do everything it can, and I can see it already, making me feel inadequate and unworthy. And I'm like, I know you can't do this. There's still that fear of abandonment. Now it's just really tapping into that awareness and understanding, all right, this is like presenting me with opportunities to transform and change and to just practice becoming this new version of myself where I am not fearful of being abandoned anymore. That's really what it was. I had such a fear of loss and abandonment. I don't want to say I had, I still do. I just recognize it, and now I have less of it. I'm able to speak up a little more. I'm able to have conversations with you where I'm not like, oh my God, he's gonna like get up and leave and never come back. It's like, all right, no, I here I am. I'm gonna practice. I'm gonna say and do and feel these certain ways so that I can allow myself to transform from the inside out, like transform and start telling new stories so that my subconscious can begin to identify with them in a more productive, holistic, loving, accepting, trusting, surrendering aspect. And then what happens? I think, because I already started seeing, then the outside world changes. Then the people around me begin to start changing. Then the circumstances of life start changing. There's nothing ever that I could do to make you leave if you were going to leave.
Right.
I can't cook enough. I can't clean enough. I can't tell you I love you enough. You're going to act that way because that's you. But I can look at our life. I can look at the circumstances differently and know that he's not going to leave me. Oh, no one's going to leave me. And even if he did, I'm still okay. I didn't actually lose anything. I gained a lot from that relationship, from this experience.
From you leaving.
Yeah.
I get it. I see how you feel.
But like, right? Did I explain that good enough? Is that okay?
I think so. I think exactly. Like, and to like lean into that example. It's like your father leaving, and then the 3 decades of you blaming him and being upset about it or whatever. I don't necessarily want to put words in your mouth, but it was just him, like, the whole time. It was just him pointing to the wound. Like, that's it. Like, it's right there.
Yeah.
And that's your abandonment. So your abandonment. And so, like, not until you were like, until you realize, oh wow, like, you didn't do this to me. You're just showing it to me. And then you can, it's like, there's so, like, it completely changes the relationship between two people to recognize, like, nobody's doing anything to me. They're just showing me where I have something to work on. And now it's like, if exactly what you're saying, like, if you can forgive him, but you don't forgive yourself, then somebody else is gonna come on. Like, then it's gonna be me that leaves you. And it's just literally me trying to point to it again. Like, no, you missed it. It's still right there. It's still right there. And if you, like so many people do, go from like one relationship to another and keep thinking like, oh, I'm like always dating assholes because they keep abandoning me or whatever it is, where each one of them is literally just like, you asked for this. I'm here to show you what you need to do next.
Yes. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I couldn't agree more.
So I think that's is a really powerful reframe for like all relationships. It's like nobody can do anything to us. They're gifting us with an opportunity to see what's within us that we can face.
And I think that, so as we're kind of like just wrapping up, it's like, all right, people understanding perhaps different limitations or constraints that they're living within. It's more, it's almost, because everybody's like, okay, what do I do now?
Mhm.
It's like, I don't even think doing anything is productive in the sense where you still must dismantle and dissolve and just become more aware of how these patterns are dictating your life. Because awareness almost like takes away its charge.
Mhm.
It takes away its ability to continue to control your life. Because if you're aware of it and you still do something, say something, act in a certain way, you're gonna catch yourself because you're aware of it. You're literally now conscious of it. You're like, oh, wait a minute. Oh my God. That's what I've been doing over the past couple months for sure, but years. It's like, oh crap, wait, I did it again.
Yep.
But it's okay. That's how you learn. It's practice. Like I said, my quote that I downloaded, years ago, and I said it on the podcast, like it doesn't happen overnight until it does.
Mhm.
And it's like it will happen overnight, but not yet.
Yeah.
Like, so it's the continuation of becoming more aware and observing and figuring out. And I mean, it's really in the realm of being, like being with your thoughts and emotions and understanding how they're driving your actions. And I truly believe that only way to really do that is to sit silently with yourself and meditate and understand or journal. Begin uncovering like how and why we do the things that we do and what's truly driving them, because there's always the root, and it is something that's deeply ingrained within us. That's typically something that we're fearful of being judged, fearful of making someone mad, fearful of someone leaving, fearful of not doing it good enough, fearful of whatever it may be. Do you agree?
Yeah, I do agree. I wanted to add before you were talking you mentioned like the higher self a little bit.
Yeah.
In the beginning, or not in the beginning, a little while ago. And I was thinking like the way, I think it was Bashar actually like got this from, but it's like the idea was like our higher self is kind of like creating our reality. And it's like the higher self conceives of what we are going to experience. And then our brain receives it. And our brain is just like a sensor. It's a receiver, like a radio receiver that's taking in all the information from our senses and our nervous system. And then our mind perceives what the brain is receiving.
Ooh, that's really good. I don't know
Yeah.
if I've heard it say that before.
Okay. So I was just saying real quick, like
Say again,
the
yeah.
the higher self conceives, the brain receives, the mind perceives. So there's a bunch of levels to it and layers to it, but it's like our state of mind and our state of consciousness really is what is creating our perception of our reality. So like that filter, all these things that we're talking about, all these subconscious beliefs and ideas and patterns and stories are aspects of the filter. So you said before, like once we like really change ourselves, then the people around us start to change. It's like once we change that filter,
Yes.
then the same experiences are perceived completely different.
1000%. I'm so glad you said this. I think that that's what I was trying to get at when I said that there's nothing to really do. It's just be, and that's what I meant. I'm so glad that you said that. Yes, it's almost like using your imagination. I know that this kind of sounds, but imagination and story is kind of like interchangeable. Like these are stories because I'm using my imagination to make up this story, make up this idea. The same thing. It's not the same. So it is like, okay, this happened. I can't change that. Like my father left before I was one. I can't change that event, but the story that I had attached to it, that's what I can change. I can change my perception of the memory of it. Kind of like what you were saying. Yeah. How can I rewrite, redefine, re-understand for myself how that was actually really beneficial? And that I'm not this sad, woe is me, scared little girl that everybody's gonna leave me. It's like, oh, wait a minute. Okay, here I go. now I'm able to relate differently to how my life was and how it can be.
Yeah.
Because that's it, that's the power that we have. Not like the past is here to teach us, not trap us. That also was like a download that I got, and that's so imperative here. Yes, like we can't live without the memories. Memories shape us, they transform us, but they also trap us if we're unwilling to see possibly how they were there to help us grow and ascend and traject on the path of, you know, our highest and greatest good forever, for whatever that may be. But it's allowing the past to not inform the future, especially if it's a future that you don't want. You have the power to change it. Like he also says this, I know I'm referencing him so much in this, probably because half of this is like from like me studying him. Everybody's trying to run away from a future that hasn't happened yet, that we make up.
Yeah.
Past hurt informs future fears, which is always said exactly what I'm saying. Your past is here to teach you, not trap you. Like, have I ever been in my future? No, I don't know. I have no idea. So that's why it's also like this present moment that we talk about all the time. The present moment is the goal. The present moment is where we are able to rewire these stories, to rewrite them, to recreate, reperceive something that was limiting us or confining us or keeping us tethered to a personality that we no longer want to be.
We try to change things as the ego, like we were kind of saying before. And that's when we want the things around us to be different, to treat us different, to give us something that we aren't giving ourselves, give us something that we think that we're missing. But it's like, what needs to change is our perception of everything. Because once we realize we already have everything, then we don't need anything to give it to us. But the more we try to get it from the outside world, it's what I was saying before about the two-way street. Every time we try to get self-worth from the outside world, it just reinforces that we don't have it. Every time we try to like fill a hole or get the outside world to not abandon us, we are creating a reinforcement of that story of the abandonment issue. So it's like this is like a finger trap. Like the harder you try to do it, the more real it gets, and the more real it gets, and the more real it gets, because it's all subconscious that's tied to the survival of the body that is, I hate to break it to you, it's an illusion anyway. It's real, like it's real because the experience is real. But it's not
true. That's
it's
what
not
says.
true.
It's real because we're experiencing it and we feel it. It's tangible and it seems very real and it does seem true to us. But the reason why it's not true, because this is what the guides say with Paul Selig through him. What is true is always true.
Yes.
So that's where you can decide, not even decide, that's literally how you know that, oh, this isn't true, because yes, this person left me, but not everybody did. Right? So then the stories lose their grip. Because as soon as you begin really understanding, observing, and becoming aware of the narrative that has been going on within your mind, playing out in this objective reality, but you just think that it's the way for everyone because you're the subject of it. No, everybody's has their own subjective reality. You have the power to change it.